Again, everybody, if you haven't watched the other videos before you watch this one, I do recommend that you go do that first. It will help so that you don't get lost. Where we last left off, Joanna had received a phone call informing her that her daughter had passed away. And so let's continue. Mark Anthony sat in his room reading, trying not to eavesdrop on his mother with little success. She was upset about Grandpa, and right now, so was he. She came into his room. You heard that, didn't you? He shook his head at her. With a sigh, she sat beside him on his single-wide bed. What you reading? He flipped his book around so that the cover faced her. The Hobbit, huh? You know this is one of your grandpa's favorites, she said. A shrug was the only response he gave. The kids in school thought it was weird that he read so much. He heard them talk about it when they thought he wasn't listening. His mom put an arm over him, hugging him to her. Come on, pal, don't be so glum. Tell you what, here in a little bit, how about we take a trip down to Nice Surprise and grab an ice cream? Sound good? It did. Mark Anthony hadn't been out for ice cream since he passed his last history test, and the treat was usually reserved for those such occasions. His smile widened. Victoria wiped a thumb across his cheek. There's my handsome guy. Let me grab a coat real fast. You too, Marky. Mom, he sighed in dislike. The pet name he preferred. He disliked the pet name. He preferred Mark Anthony since starting elementary school. Yet another thing his peers found odd about him. The sign reading "Nice Surprise" was in the typical Arctic art decal of nearly every ice cream shop in the world, with the ice part emphasized in big red letters. Mark Anthony ordered a sundae, his mother a simple strawberry cone. After a few bites, Mark piped up, You know why they call it a sundae? Victoria sounded out. A long time ago, when ice cream floats were being made, a lot of religious guys thought it was bad to eat them on Sundays. So you know what they did? What's that? They took the soda out. Really? She said, genuinely interested. So that's supposed to make it something different? I guess. I thought it sounded stupid. It's just ice cream. Victoria stared in awe at her boy, so bright and kind. Where had he gotten that? She didn't believe it could have been her. He slipped another spoonful down and looked at his sundae. I don't want things to change anymore. She felt the pang of guilt. How long ago had the move been? By now she thought that he'd be more adjusted, but he still seemed so far away. Not a single friend, 3 months and not a one. How could that be? That was a large part of the reason she wanted him to visit his grandfather. Maybe it'd lift his spirits. Mom? She shook herself awake. Oh, yes, honey? You were staring at me. Well, mister, maybe I was just trying to kill that spider behind you with my heat vision. She cocked her eyebrows up. Mark Anthony gave a sarcastic look, but his gaze slowly shifted behind him till he was turned all the way around. Made you look, she said with a smile. He turned back. You're funny, Mom, he told her in a matter-of-fact voice that seemed too old for him. Good funny or bad funny? He put a finger to his lower lip and thought, definitely bad. She fell back in her seat. Well, let's see who takes you out for ice cream next time. She threw a napkin at him. They laughed. It felt good to forget the world sometimes and pretend that it all ended at the door. Of course, the charade would end soon, and the walls would close back in around them. It was dusk outside, and 2 ice creams in had been enough to call it a day. Beside her, as she drove home, Mark Anthony began to doze off. He had an eerie resemblance to his father. Victoria had only seen a handful of photos of Tim at that age, and she had typically had at least a glass of wine in her at the time. Family get-togethers have a way of doing that. A tear welled up in the corner of her eye, threatening to spill down her face. She blinked it away and wiped her face with the ball of her hand. Don't do this now, she thought in vain. Right now, Tim was probably elbow deep in floozies, all pawing at his chiseled frame, not thinking even for a moment that some little boy out there would call him dad, or a woman still loved him. When they pulled into the drive, she fought the she fought to regain control of her emotions before waking Marky up. He had been through enough today. With a gentle push, she woke him and led the boy whose face pained her inside, loving him unconditionally in a mother's way. He was wiping the sleep from his eyes when they got inside. "Any homework, bud?" Victoria asked. "Miss Hoover wants us to fill out the states on a sheet and match them with the capitals." "Better get to it then. I'm going to go get dinner started." He nodded and shuffled off into his room, leaving her to her own devices in the kitchen. She thought about the phone call earlier. It felt a little like taking advantage of them, pitting the two against each other like that. But how else could she get her father to listen? Every time she tried to talk to him, he retreated behind a safety blanket of guilt. Worst of all, she knew exactly what he felt: to be left, to feel used and tossed aside for the next best thing. It made it hard to feel anger at him, despite the anger behind her eyes. She got up. She got a pot of water to a low simmer and got out a pack of noodles. But when she pulled on the Tear Here tab, the bag split down the middle, sending dried noodles raining down around her. With a tired grunt, she started to clean them up. "You're looking good, babe," she thought in his voice, looking at like my sweet thing. She screamed once, twice, and threw the handful of cheap noodles, the tears tearing free again. "Damn it," she stuttered, gathering them up again. "Mom?" I heard a noise. Mark Anthony stood in the doorway, book in hand. "It was nothing, sweetie. I just dropped some stuff by mistake." She forced a smile from her glistening cheeks. It felt weak and didn't do much to reassure Mark Anthony. She held out her arms. Mark went into them without question, letting her sob into his shoulder as they sat on the ground. "Mom, water," he said suddenly. "What?" she replied, looking up and seeing the beginning of a boil-over taking place on the stovetop. "Shit!" She got up and clicked off the stove, barely avoiding catastrophe. "Maybe we should just order a pizza," Mark said. "Well, Mr. Smarty Pants, that's not such a bad idea." "Ham and pineapple?" "What other kind is there?" In about an hour, they were sitting, enjoying an extra large from Benny's, talking over the TV. Victoria saw Mark Anthony drifting off and sent him to bed. The sun had only just came up over the mountains, painting the sky in a glorious yellow when Mark Anthony was shook awake by his mother. "Mom?" he said, rubbing his eyes. What's going on?" She wore an enormous smile, her teeth a pearlescent white in her mouth. "Come on, sleepyhead. We're going out. Get dressed." Mark Anthony worked with the drowsiness of sleep still on him. He hardly knew how he got into the vehicle, or even where they were going. He couldn't shake the sleep. It was like he really couldn't wake up. He kept trying to talk to his mom, but his voice sounded like a far-off echo. One of the last things he heard was his mother saying, "Special boy, special, special boy." Then he was looking up from his seat, something hot dripping in his face. There was a noise around him. Yelling, maybe? He tried to sit up, but a white-hot flare in his head stopped him. "Mom," he wheezed, looking around. There was dirt outside the window where it shouldn't be. More warm stuff dripped in his face. With his sleeve he wiped it, looking up to see where it was coming from. When he did, his body stiffened with shock before he passed out. Above him, mangled in the metals of the vehicle, was his mother, only one arm poked out from the mass of pinkish-red flesh where a torso should have been. A man who had seen the wreck stood on the knoll, looking down at the hunk of metal, thinking, "No way anyone could survive that." He dialed 911 anyways. No way. And that's all for today. I'll be sure to be putting up more videos as soon as possible. And everybody have a good day now. Thank you so much for listening. Bye.